All right, so on problem or example 18-9, it asks us to look at equivalent units of production. And so essentially what this is we're going to track all of the costs that go through work in process. And so part of them are going to be completely done units and part of them are going to be partially done units. And so what that's going to look like is when we start a month or start a period, we're going to have units that are already in production. And so when we start, they're going to be a certain percentage done. So if we are going through and we start a process and we start a month and they were 40% done coming in, that means in this current month that we're doing, we're only going to account for 60% of the cost related to those. And then in items that have been started and completed during the month, that's going to be 100%. And then at the end of the month, we're going to have inventory that is setting in process. So maybe we have inventory that's in process that's 40% done. So now we're going to account for just 40% of that. And so what we do is we're going to get a equivalent unit. So they're not really everything that's been finished. It's going to be the equivalent that's been finished. And so in this problem, we have Kellogg Company. They're making cereal. And so what it's going to tell us is that we have, so we're working in the packing department. And to start off the month, we had 1,200 pounds of cereal and we had 800 boxes in beginning inventory to start with. Then it says that we packaged 65,400 boxes of cereal were packaged during the month, and that we added conversion cost to that. And so if you remember, conversion cost is the cost that it takes us to go from a raw material or a direct material into a finished product. So in this case, we have cereal and boxes are going to be our direct material, and then direct labor and factory overhead is going to be the conversion cost that takes it to go from a direct material to a finished good. And then tells us at the end of the month, we have 900 pounds of cereal sitting in the hopper and 600 empty boxes. And it wants us to determine, so in units or in boxes, so we're not dealing in dollars, we're dealing in either pounds of cereal or boxes. What are the equivalent units for March? So we're going to start with our beginning inventory. And so what are the equivalent units for March? And so since it tells us that 1,200 pounds of cereal was introduced last month, that means that none of that 1,200 is going to be included in March's equivalent units. Okay, same thing with the boxes. The boxes were introduced last month, so that's going to be a 0. But for conversion cost, so the boxes were introduced, but they were empty boxes. So to convert them to finished, we have 800 units of conversion cost to include. And I realize this is kind of weird since we're dealing in boxes and pounds and not dollars. I think later on, once we get into dollars, I think it makes it just a little bit easier to understand. At least it does for me. And so the next line, this is going to be started and completed in March. And so it says that we boxed up, 65,400. So that was the total that we boxed up. But we already had, let's see here. But we already had 800 boxes in beginning inventory. So what was started and completed out of that 65,400 is going to be the difference between the 65,400 and what we started with. And so in this column, we're dealing with cereal in pounds. And so it tells us in the problem that there's 24 ounces per box. So that's 1.5 pounds per box, or 1.5 times. So we multiply this times 1.5. And so we started and completed 96,900 pounds of cereal. And so for the boxes, same idea. We finished 65,400, but we already had 800 in the hopper. So that gives us 64,600. And so for conversion cost, it's going to be the same. So the total that we transfer to finished goods is going to be 96,900 pounds of cereal, 64,600 in boxes, and 65,400 in conversion cost. So that makes sense. It tells us that we package 6,500 boxes, and so conversion cost we actually had to apply $800 worth of cost. So this is the total amount that goes to finished goods. And so we're accounting for all the cost from the beginning inventory. We're accounting all the cost that was started and completed. And now we have to account for the cost items that are not finished but left in work in process. So it tells us that there is 900 pounds of cereal. And it tells us there is 600 boxes in the hopper. And now we get to conversion cost. And so now this is what's left in ending inventory. And so these are pounds of cereal and empty boxes, but we haven't converted them to a finished good in March. So in this case, we have 0 conversion cost for what's left in there. So that would make sense. So beginning inventory, we had to add conversion costs to get it there. Ending inventory, we just have the raw materials, but we haven't converted them yet. So hopefully that makes some sense. All right, so in exercise 18-16, this is going to be a lot like the previous problem where we were calculating equivalent units. We're just going to take it one step further, and not only are we going to do equivalent units, but we're going to assign the cost related to that as well. And so in this situation, so we have the roasting department for morning brew coffee, gives us some information, what we started with, what we ended with, and then we have to essentially just walk through our cost of production report. So okay, so starting off, so for the report we're going to have whole units, and then we're going to break that down into the equivalent units for direct materials and the conversion cost. And then we assign costs to direct materials and conversion cost, and then total cost over here. So on this first line, and so we account for all the units that have been charged to production. So we start with the inventory in process as of August 1. And so that tells us right here that there was 900 pounds of coffee. Or I'm sorry, 700 pounds of coffee. And so we start with 700, and it says that during the period we had 14,300 were added. So we need to account for, in some fashion, 15,000 pounds of coffee. And so for the units to be assigned cost, for the beginning inventory, it tells us that we have 700. And so we have to break those 700 whole units down and figure out how much are we going to apply direct cost to and how much are we going to apply conversion cost to. And so since these were in beginning inventory, that means that the direct material cost was last month in July. So that means that there's going to be no cost related to that beginning amount for our current month. And then it tells us that, okay, so we had 700 beans in there that we had started production on, and they were 20% complete in the prior month. So that means that we have 80% to account for this month. And so now we have to calculate what was started and completed. So we know what was introduced. We introduced that 14,300, but we didn't finish all that 14,300. It says over here that we have 400 pounds that did not get finished. So what was started and completed during the month was 13,900. Now, since none of this was in beginning inventory to start the period, but it was all introduced in the current month, that means that we have 13,900 pounds of direct material to assign cost to. And since we started and completed it, that means that we used conversion cost to get these beans finished. We also have 13,900 of conversion cost. All right, so now we know the total that was transferred to finished goods. So that's going to be the beginning plus what was started and completed. And now we also have beans that were introduced to the process but not finished. And so we had a total of 400 that was not finished. And so since we introduced those beans, that was the first step. So the direct material is there. So all 400 pounds get included in direct materials. But it says that they were only 42% complete. So if we take the total that was introduced, multiply it times our 42%, that means we introduced 168 pounds of conversion cost. So we have 15,000 pounds of whole beans to account for, but only 14,300 of direct materials and 14,628 of conversion cost to account for. So now we can go down to our cost section. And so the first thing it asks us for the total cost for August in the roasting department. And so it actually gives us this total cost right here. So 65,780. And it also gives us conversion cost of 21,942. And so what we do is we want to figure out the cost per equivalent unit. And so since we're dealing with direct materials, the direct material units was 14,300. So we put that here. And then for conversion cost, we had 14,628. Put that here. So that means the cost per equivalent unit, we have 460 for direct materials and 150 for conversion cost. And so the next we have cost assigned to production. So the inventory as of August 1st, and it actually tells us right here that the beginning work in process was $3,479. And then the total costs that are incurred during the period, it also gave us that, so that's going to be the total of direct materials and conversion cost. And so the total cost to account for is $91,201. All right, so now we're going to take our costs that are allocated plus, and so it's allocated to finished goods plus the completed and partially completed. So the inventory that we started with, it gave us that number, $3,479. And so the cost to complete that beginning inventory, so for direct materials, we had 0 direct material units multiplied times our direct material cost per unit. It's going to be 0. And then we had our conversion cost units of beginning inventory, multiply it times our 150, gives us $840. So the cost to complete our beginning inventory as of August 1st was $4,319. And so for started and completed, so we calculated that those units up here. So for direct materials was 13,900 times our 460. And then conversion costs were also 13,900 times our 150. And so that means we transferred to finished goods 89,104. Then for our ending inventory, we had 400 of direct materials at 460. And we had 168 pounds of coffee for conversion cost times our 150. So there we go. And now we've accounted for the full $91,201 of cost to the roasting department.